It's me again, it's Earle from the Learnanatomy team, and this is just a little video to hopefully help you better understand what we mean by planes and axes of motion. I've got a few interesting ideas to help you better learn and conceptualize what these planes and axes of motion are. And I'm joined by my wonderful little friend, and I call him Boris Jr., to help us understand the human body, concepts of the human body, relational terms, and putting that all together. So once again, more of this you can find on our website learnanatomy.uk. But as you can see, the way that Boris Jr. is standing is everything is facing forward. His palms are facing forward, his whole appearance is facing forward, and that's called the anatomical pose or stance or position. And there's multiple things that we need to understand, because when we refer to the human body, we use this particular stance, everything facing forward, as the key underpinning stance that we can relate different terms to. So what we want to do now is just take you through how we can divide the body up or make different cuts along different planes. So the first thing that we can do, and I'm going to get my little sweet friends out to help us along our journey. So the first thing that I want to take you through is how we can divide the body. So the first plane I want to discuss is when we make a cut, and I'm going to use the toothpick here to show you. So when we make a cut, that we're dividing the body into a left and right, so we're separating the body into a left and right, the plane that we're cutting through is called the sagittal plane. Now if we go right through the midline, so cutting right through the midline, so there's an equal left and right, that's called the mid-sagittal plane. So the first plane that you can understand is dividing the body into a left and right, and that's called a sagittal plane. The next thing that we can do, we can separate the body into a front and back, or anterior and posterior compartment. So what we're doing, we're cutting little Boris Jr. into a front and back. He puts up a really good front, but it's also interesting to see his back at times. I don't like talking behind it, but this is just a little clue. So the jelly baby here, we've separated into a front and a back, front and back. And that's called a frontal or coronal plane, where we separate so we can better understand front and back of the human body. And finally, the last plane that we can cut through, we cut right across the body, so we get a cross section, and that usually separates the body into a top and a bottom, and that, or superior and an inferior part, and that we can cut it at multiple levels to understand and recognize the structures that lie across that plane. So the three important planes again, the sagittal plane, the frontal plane, and the transverse plane, which is this plane that cuts the body into a top and a bottom, or superior and inferior. Understanding that is part of the journey. The next little bit is, well, the concept of how humans move and how joints work, and that will be in a later video. But at this point, it's more important to just let you understand how axes of motion work. So I'm going to use the toothpick to show you or demonstrate axes of motion. So there's my little jelly baby, and we're going to put a toothpick that goes all the way from the front to the bottom. So that's actually a vertical axis or longitudinal. It goes all the way through the body, right from the crown of the skull all the way to the feet. And the reason why I use jelly babies and a toothpick, because then it becomes more practical. Now we can actually play with this to better understand. So as that axis moves, the body rotates. So the longitudinal axis is a good example of showing you rotational forces within the body. That's the longitudinal axis. The next one that we can use is that we can move an axis from the front to the back. That's called anterior posterior, from the front to the back. And all I have to do is turn that, and the body will turn with that axis. And that is really, for example, when you do a cartwheel, when you move from side to side. That's called the anterior posterior axis as you move across. And the last one is when we place an axis from one side of the body to the other. So not through the front and back, but from side to side. And as that axis turns, we get, for example, a somersault. So we get the person moving around that axis. And that is called a horizontal axis. So the planes are the sagittal, frontal, and transverse. And the axes are the longitudinal for rotation, the anterior posterior for side to side, for example in a cartwheel, and finally the horizontal axis in a forward roll. So those are some examples that you can use. For example, a packet of jelly babies with toothpicks, fantastic learning aid to really zone in and help you better understand and appreciate how these different axes and planes of motion work together to enable us to move.